The bride who walked into dust. The wind had teeth that morning. It came clawing down from the mesa, rolling dust across Ash Hollow's one thin road like it meant to bury the town hole. The horses felt it first, ears flat, tails flicking, nostrils flaring at something they couldn't name. By the time the people noticed, she was already there, a figure, walking slow through the storm. Her dress had once been white. Now was the color of old bones and road dust, dragging through the grit with each step. Her shoes were worn near through, the leather cracked and curling like parchment. The veil clung to her shoulders, torn at one corner, and the desert light burned gold through it, turning her shape half real, half ghost. The town stopped breathing. From a saloon porch, two card players froze mid-deal. The blacksmith leaned against his anvil, sweat running through soot. Even the dog that always barked at strangers only whined once and backed under the trough. Down the road, the cowboy stood beside his horse, tightening the bridle strap. He was tall, shoulders drawn tight from a life that didn't leave much room for softness. The brim of his hat shaded his eyes, but the jaw beneath it clenched once, slow. The woman came closer, head bowed against the wind, carrying nothing but a small bundle wrapped in a handkerchief. No wagon, no ring of escort riders, no sign of anyone behind her. Just the crunch of her shoes in the sand, steady and tired. Someone whispered, "Lord above, is she coming from the ridge?" "Looks like it," another said. "Ain't nothing past there but ghosts." The cowboy didn't move. When she reached him, she stopped just short of the trough, her breath shivering in the dry air. The dust settled between them like smoke after a shot. He looked down, at her shoes split open at the sides, toes bruised from walking miles barefoot inside them. He spoke then, voice low and even as the ground. "Then you've brought everything." The wind paused long enough for the words to hang there, heavy and strange. She looked up. Her eyes were gray, the kind of gray that comes after too much seeing. She didn't smile, didn't weep, just nodded. Once, as if his words had settled something neither of them would name. From the porch, the saloon keeper called out, trying to laugh, but not quite managing it. "Ma'am, you lost your wedding party? Ain't seen no preacher come through today." The woman's voice was quiet, hoarse from dust. "I'm not lost." She turned her gaze past him, to the north edge of town, where the land stretched flat and open toward the red cliffs. "I'm looking for Vale Ranch." The cowboy's hand stopped on the bridle. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Vale Ranch has been dead near 3 years," the blacksmith said. "Ain't no one there but the coyotes." She looked at him calm. "Then I'll keep him company." No one spoke after that. Just the squeal of the saloon sign on its chain and the flap of a shutter in the wind. The cowboy studied her for a long moment. The dust traced the line of his boot, lifting, swirling, falling again. Finally, he reached for the canteen tied to his saddle and offered it to her. She took it in both hands, drank deep, and gave it back. Her fingers shook a little, but not from fear. "Much obliged," she murmured. He nodded once, slow. "You walked far." "Far enough," she said. The sheriff stepped out from the saloon, then, spurs clicking against the porch boards. He was a tall man gone soft with comfort, a silver badge catching the light. His eyes moved from her to the cowboy, back again. "Well now," he said, forcing a smile. "If this ain't a sight for sore eyes. You come in all this way dressed like that. Mind telling me why?" The bride met his gaze. "My name's Eleanor Vale." The sheriff's face went still, then careful. "Vale, you say?" "Yes, sheriff," she said. "I came for what's mine." The cards on the saloon table stopped moving. Somewhere, a horse snorted and stamped. The sheriff let out a low whistle. "Ain't no Vale property left worth coming for, ma'am. Your husband's debts saw to that. I'm not here for debts." Her voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a knife pulled slow from its sheath. "I'm here for the truth." The sheriff's smile faded. "Best truth you'll find here's to keep riding. Ain't nothing but sorrow waiting on that land." The cowboy's eyes shifted toward the sheriff. Just a flicker, but it was there. Recognition. Something heavy, unspoken. Eleanor turned, started walking again. Past the trough, past the saloon, down the road that led toward the canyon. The wind followed her, dragging her veil behind like a whisper. The cowboy watched her go until the dust swallowed her shape. Then he untied his horse, swung into the saddle, and rode after her without a word. Behind them, the sheriff leaned against the post and spat into the dirt. His voice was quiet, meant for no one but himself. "Lord help us." She came back. The old storyteller's voice comes then, like the crackle of firewood in the dark. They say she walked straight through the bones of Ash Hollow that day, eyes fixed on land the earth had tried to forget. No one knew what she carried in that heart of hers, but it weren't love, not anymore. It was older than love, colder, the kind that don't fade with time, only waits. And that cowboy, he must have seen it too, 'cause from that moment on, neither of them looked back. The wind howls through the empty street, lifting a scrap of veil that catches on the hitching post. The dust takes it, twirling it away toward the horizon, and the town goes back to holding its breath. Ash Hollow's ghosts. The fire popped, sending a ribbon of sparks up into the black. Eleanor sat close to the flames, her dress gathered at her knees, boots drying from creek water. The cowboy sat across from her, hat low, back to the canyon wind. Between them, a tin pot simmered on the coals, coffee dark as iron. She hadn't spoken in hours. Neither had he. Only the coyotes talked, far off across the flats. When she finally did, it was like the wind itself carried the words. "You knew my husband." Calder didn't move. "Name's been mentioned, sure. You rode with him once," she said, voice steady. "You were there when he died." The sound of the wind deepened in the canyon. Calder's fingers stilled on his coffee cup. The flames shifted, painting his face in flicker and shadow. "Town says a lot of things," he muttered. She looked at him, the firelight catching the hollow of her cheek. "They said he stole cattle, that he ran off in the night. But I buried his ring, Mr. Boone. Men don't run without their rings." He glanced up at her then, eyes cold as creek stone. "You diggin' for trouble," he said. "I'm diggin' for truth," she replied. Same as he did. The fire hissed as a gust of wind swept through camp. Somewhere up the slope, the horses stamped and whinnied. The desert stretched around them like a great, dark sea, the stars scattered bright and cold above. Calder leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "There's a reason Ash Hollow don't talk about Vale Ranch. Some things oughta stay buried." Eleanor's gaze didn't waver. Buried men deserve justice. He studied her across the flames, and for a long while, neither spoke. Only the crackle of wood and the sigh of the canyon filled the silence. When he finally spoke again, it was quiet, almost to himself. He was a good man. Eleanor's lips trembled, but her voice did not. "Then why'd they hang him?" Calder looked into the fire, eyes gone far away. "Because good don't weigh much against greed. Sheriff and his boys been running cattle through this valley for years, changing brands in the dark. Your man found proof. Tried to take it to the circuit judge. He didn't make it that far." The wind moaned low between the rocks. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. "And you watched." "I watched," Calder said. "Watched till I couldn't anymore. Then I left this place behind." She stared at him, seeing the truth laid bare in the tremor that crossed his jaw. "You left him hanging." His eyes snapped to hers, firelight cutting sharp across his face. "I buried him," he said, voice rough as gravel. Wasn't much left to save after that. The silence after was heavy enough to choke the wind. Eleanor looked down at her hands, pale against the dirt. "Then you'll help me finish it." Calder didn't answer. He reached for his rifle instead, checked the chamber, then set it across his knees. The gesture said more than words could. The old storyteller's voice slides in through the fire smoke, soft as a whisper through time. Some say the night held its breath then, waiting to see if two broken souls could shoulder the weight of one man's ghost. By dawn, they were riding again. The light crept pale over the cliffs, turning the sand to gold. Eleanor rode straight-backed, veil tied now as a scarf against the wind. Calder rode beside her, hat low, eyes fixed ahead. They passed dry creek beds and the bones of cabins long abandoned. Fences rotted down to splinters, the land left hollow and hungry. At noon, they stopped beneath a dead cottonwood. Calder dismounted, checking the horizon. "Coyote Ridge," he said. Vale Ranches just past there. Eleanor shaded her eyes. The ridge rose sharp and red, sunlight blazing off the stone like fire. Beyond it lay the valley, quiet, empty, and waiting. She turned to him. You said they took his life. Did they take the land too? They took everything worth selling, Calder said. Left the rest to rot. She nodded once. Then I'll take it back. The wind rose, carrying dust and the faint rattle of something metal in the distance. Maybe a gate, maybe a memory. When they rode through the pass, the world fell silent. The valley opened wide below. The ranch crouched like a scar against the hillside. Fence posts leaned broken. The barn sagged, the corral half gone. But there was the house John Vale built with his own hands, still standing. Eleanor dismounted and walked to the porch. Her fingers traced the doorframe, worn smooth by years of touch. She stepped inside. The air was thick with dust. The floorboards creaked under her weight. On the mantel, a small horseshoe lay half buried in grit. She brushed it clean, eyes softening as she turned it over. Calder lingered in the doorway. You sure you want to stay here? Ain't safe ground. Eleanor looked up, gaze sharp as cut glass. There's no safe ground left, Mr. Boone. Only what's right. She walked out past him, across the yard toward a patch of land that dipped low near the fence. Grass grew thin there, and the earth bore the mark of a shallow mound. She knelt, brushed aside the dust until the edge of a wooden cross showed through. John Vale, she whispered. Husband, rancher, honest man. Her voice trembled once, then hardened. I came back, love. I'll finish what they started. Calder's shadow fell across the grave. He looked down at her, the brim of his hat hiding his eyes. His hand tightened around the rifle. Then we best be ready, he said. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain, rare and strange for that land. Far off, thunder rolled behind the cliffs. The storyteller's voice returns, low and steady, like an old memory stirred awake. They say the sky darkened that afternoon, though not a cloud dared cross the sun. Folks in town felt it in their bones, the kind of stillness that comes before blood and reckoning. The bride had found her ground, and Ash Hollow was about to remember what it had buried. The wind carried the words away, down the ridge, over the dry fences and the hollow barns, until the valley itself seemed to whisper them back. And for the first time in years, the land felt alive again. The showdown at Vale Ranch. The air was heavy before sunrise, thick with the scent of dust and iron. The world held still, as if waiting for a shot to break the silence. Eleanor stood on the porch of the ranch house, veil gone, hair pinned back, rifle leaning against the doorframe. Her hands were steady, but her breath came slow, measured. Across the yard, the wind pressed against the broken fences, stirring dry grass like whispers. From beyond the ridge came the sound of hooves. 6, maybe 7 riders. Their silhouettes crested the hill like black teeth against the rising sun. She didn't move. Calder was already in the barn, checking his rifle, sliding bullets into the chamber with careful hands. The scar across his knuckles caught the light. He glanced once toward her through the gap in the wood. No words, just a look that said its time. The horse's hooves drew closer. The sheriff's voice cut through the dawn. Mrs. Vale, you're standing on stolen land. Eleanor stepped down from a porch. Dust rose around her boots. The sun flared behind the riders, turning them into shadows rimmed with fire. This land's mine, she said, bought with a good man's blood. The sheriff chuckled low, a sound like gravel. Your man was a thief, same as the one hiding in that barn. Ain't no use hanging on to ghosts, ma'am. Her eyes didn't waver. Then maybe you should stop making him. He smirked, lifted his hand, and the men fanned out across the yard, rifles glinting. From the barn, a single gun cocked. The first shot split the air. One rider fell before he could raise his rifle, his hat spinning into the dirt. The rest scattered, shouting. The horses screamed and reared, hooves tearing up the ground. Calder stepped out from the shadows of the barn, long coat whipping in the wind, rifle raised. His face was all stone and fire, eyes unreadable. The storyteller's voice murmurs through the dust. They say the sun blinked when Calder Boone drew that morning, like even the heavens didn't care to see what came next. Another shot, a A second rider went down, rifle clattering. Boom! The sheriff roared. You aim to die for a widow's folly? Calder fired once more. The bullet caught the sheriff's hat and spun it clean off his head. I ain't died yet, he said. The wind howled between them, carrying the smell of powder and sweat. Eleanor ducked behind the trough, snatched a fallen revolver, checked the cylinder. The metal was cold and familiar, as though it had been waiting for her hand. Two riders broke from cover, circling wide to flank the barn. Calder dropped one, but the other's shot tore through his sleeve, slicing blood down his arm. He didn't flinch. He chambered another round, sighted steady, fired. The last man fell without a sound. The sheriff rode forward alone now, dust curling around his boots. His revolver gleamed silver, his badge brighter still. He stopped halfway to the porch, staring at Eleanor. You could have gone quiet, he said. Could have let this place die like it was meant to. Eleanor rose from behind the trough, revolver in both hands. Then I'd have been just like you. He sneered. You think killing me makes it right? You don't have the stomach, Mrs. Vale. His hand twitched toward his holster. Hers moved first. The crack echoed across the valley. The sheriff's badge shattered, splinter of metal, puff of dust. He staggered back, eyes wide, hand clutching at the hole in his chest. For a heartbeat, he looked almost human. Then he fell. The wind caught the dust and carried it away. Silence. Eleanor stood still, revolver lowered. The smoke curled from its barrel in slow, graceful threads. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned steady. Behind her, Calder stumbled from the barn, blood on his sleeve, breath ragged. He leaned against a post, watching her. You done it, he said quietly. She turned to him, voice low. We done it. He smiled faintly, a line of red tracing his jaw. Ain't no we for me. This was your fight. She crossed the yard, caught him as his knees buckled. The rifle slipped from his hand, clattering into the dust. Stay with me, she whispered. He shook his head, eyes closing. Didn't kill for you, Ellie. Just set the record straight. The wind pressed through the valley again, softer this time, almost like a sigh. The dust lifted, swirled, settled. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold across the blood and boards. Eleanor knelt there, holding him until the stillness took him. The storyteller's voice comes again, low and reverent. They say when the gun smoke cleared, the land itself breathed easier. Justice, it seems, has its own kind of mercy. The bride stood tall in the morning light, her shadow long across the field where liars once stood. She laid Calder down beside the porch, covering his face with her veil. Then she walked to the fence, where the wind moved through the dry grass. She holstered the revolver, turned once toward the ridge, and whispered something the earth alone could hear. Down in town, folks swore they heard the echo of a single gunshot carried on the wind that morning. They said it rolled through the canyon and up the church bell like thunder, though no bell rang. By the time anyone rode out to Vale Ranch, the bodies were gone. Only the sheriff's badge lay half-buried in dust, glinting in the sun like it had been left there on purpose. The old storyteller's voice lingers, heavy with smoke and memory. Some men die for money, some for pride. But once in a lifetime, you get a woman who kills for truth, and the world remembers her name longer than any outlaws. The wind sighs, the sky bleeds orange, and Ash Hollow, for the first time in years, is quiet. The bride's true name. The saloon door burst inward on a wind of grit and gunpowder. Harlan and his men froze mid-draw. Dust spiraled around the doorway, and through it stepped the bride, no longer trembling, no longer soft. Her wedding dress was torn at the hem, her boots caked in blood and sand, her eyes burning like dusk fire. In her hands gleamed the double-barreled shotgun that had hung above Cole's mantel since before the drought. Put the gun down, girl, Harlan growled, steady as stone. Ain't your fight. Mary leveled the barrel. Ain't it? The air went dead quiet, the kind that made a man hear his own heartbeat. The piano man stopped mid-note, the barkeep ducked low. Outside, the last of the sunlight bled red across the canyon's rim. Cole stepped out from the shadows at the far end of the saloon, his revolver drawn but low. His hat shadowed his eyes. She's right, he said softly. Ain't nobody's fight but hers. Harlan's gaze cut to him, then back to her. You letting her do your shooting now, Cole? Cole holstered his iron. Not letting her do nothing. She came to finish what you started. Mary's voice was low, rough with dust. You killed my husband. A flicker crossed Harlan's face, surprise, then disdain. Your husband? That bounty man who came sniffing after me in Santa Fe. Her finger twitched against the trigger. You shot him in the back, she said, every word slow as a church bell. Left him to the coyotes. Wasn't nothing personal, Harlan muttered, spreading his hands. He knew what he signed up for. Mary took a step forward, the boards creaking beneath her worn boots. So do I. The gun roared, once then twice. Harlan's right-hand man went down before he could blink. The second fell, trying to unjam his Colt. Smoke filled the room, bitter and thick. Harlan dived behind a table as Cole took cover by the bar. Bullets tore through bottles, spraying whiskey like amber rain. Cole shouted over the gunfire. Mary down. She didn't move. A slug grazed her arm. She barely flinched. She reloaded with a motion too sure, too practiced for a ranch bride. The men who saw it froze. That kind of calm belonged to a soldier. Cole's eyes widened. You said you were from Missouri, he muttered between shots. I am, she said, eyes never leaving Harlan's cover. 33rd Infantry, widow of Captain James Holloway. We buried too many men to run now. The revelation hit like thunder. The bride, a war veteran, a ghost of the Union Army. The shooting stopped for a heartbeat. Wind howled through the doorway like it had heard the truth and wanted to carry it away. Harlan rose slow, bleeding from the shoulder. You think that makes you a match for me? She didn't answer. She aimed. Cole stepped out beside her. No, he said. Makes her better. The next exchange was fast, the kind of fast only legends remember. Harlan fired. The bullet missed her by an inch. She returned both barrels. He staggered, fell, tried to lift his weapon. Cole's shot hit home before the outlaw could finish his breath. Then it was over. The dust settled. The saloon smelled of cordite, whiskey, and old fear. A fly buzzed somewhere near the bodies. Cole holstered his gun. You all right? Mary's breath came slow and steady. She wiped a streak of blood from her cheek with the back of her hand. Never better. He nodded quiet. Didn't know you were military. Didn't think it mattered, she said, eyes on the fallen men. Not till now. From the doorway, the sheriff stumbled in, too late as always, eyes wide at the wreckage. Lord Almighty, he whispered. What in hell happened here? Cole just looked at Mary. She answered for them both. Justice. The sheriff blinked, then sighed. Suppose that's one way to call it. He had Harlan's still body, then her shotgun. You know they'll come looking for the rest of his gang. They'll come for you. Mary nodded. Let him. She turned and walked out into the dying light, her wedding dress trailing dust. Cole followed her to the hitching post. The wind had shifted, softer now, cooler. The horses waited, restless but alive. He reached for the reins of his old bay, then hesitated. You sure you want this life, ma'am? He asked. Ain't much peace on this road. Mary looked down at her boots, scuffed, torn, worn by miles and loss. Then she lifted her chin. Peace was never promised, she said. But freedom, that's worth the dust. Cole smiled faintly. Then you've brought everything. She met his gaze, the firelight of dusk in her eyes. Guess I have. They rode out together, two figures fading into the canyon's golden gray, their shadows stretching long across the road that led west. Behind them, the town was silent, but already the tale was taking root. By nightfall, the saloon talk had turned to whispers, about the widow who'd walked in wearing a torn dress and walked out with a gun, about the cowboy who'd stood beside her without asking why. By morning it was legend, and somewhere, in a campfire circle or a lonely tavern far from that place, an old storyteller leaned close to the flame and said, They say she came to him barefoot, with nothing but the dust on her dress and fire in her eyes. They say he looked down at those worn shoes and told her, Then you've brought everything. And together, they wrote the end of an outlaw's name on the wind. The storyteller paused, smiled at the children huddled near the glow. Now, you listen close, he said, 'cause out there on the plains, when the night's real still, you can still hear the echo of her boots, and the whisper that justice rides best when it's born of sorrow. The fire cracked, the desert wind moaned, and the tale lived on.